Hello, good morning. Welcome to the morning programs at Dailies. Today, the 7th of February 2025. Quite a number of stories are making it the headlines on the papers. Please do well to follow us as we go through reviewing the papers and then drop your comment, your views regarding any of the story that's quite of interest to you this morning. I am Sele Lashadasho, updating this program together with Rachel Tazi. Good morning.
Good morning, Sele.
All right, we will be running through the papers, starting with the Nation newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, the first story, Obia Bernard GHL appeal against favorable ruling. Federal government evacuates 7,790 refugees from Chad. Unia Abuja, UNN get new vice chancellors. Universities leadership reject. You can find details on page 28. Asset panel report, Obaseki left 682 billion naira debt in Edo. NBA panel reviews conflicting court judgments. You can find details of this story on page 26 and 3. The big story on the Nation newspaper, 32 proposals for new states before House of Reps panel. And then we just have a press release coming from the House of Reps saying that this information that have been trending since yesterday and is on most of our papers today, that it is misleading in a lot of ways. First of all, it's a private sponsored bill by individuals, and then there are so many other procedures to be followed before a bill is passed, and then is not out there yet. So it's very misleading, and therefore it should not be regarded as it is being put on the papers. And I believe that more information will come out concerning this news, but it is misleading as we can see it on the papers. PDP disciplinary committee summons Anyawu and Autumn. You can start with the details on the front page. We have a story, body of abducted Anambra lawmaker found. NPA raises tariffs on port services by 15%. You can find details on page 7, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, fresh price hike looms as NPA planned 15% tariff increase, detail found on page 23. And then we're still having other stories still on the Punch newspaper, where we have Tinubu Mbeke Gowon advocate homegrown solution to Africans' challenges. PDP crisis in Kimbi panel received 30 petitions, summon Anyawu and Autumn. You can find more detail of that story on page 2. Lagos instills speed limit monitors, impose 50,000 naira fine, and I hope to see other states also taking the same lead, because the number of attacks we're having is as a result of speeding. So let's see what other states will do, and kudos to Lagos State for actually having these monitors. Opposition plans unveiled of mega coalition June, with the detail of the story found on page 12, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On this day newspaper, 2013 power sector privatization unfruitful. Operators lack technical financial capacity to deliver optimally. This is man saying decries incessant increases in electricity tariff, says Nigeria requires 30,000 megawatts of electricity supply daily, and we are barely over 5,000 or 6,000 megawatts of electricity. Tinubu celebrates Fayemi at 60, Adesina at 65, Owosemo at 70. You can find details on page 34. Helen Prest Ajayi's mother affirms daughter's marriage to late Tosin Ajayi. You can find details on page 16. Showing on seriousness, House targets 67 states, proposes creation of additional 31. We've said that this is misleading. And the big story on the paper, female genital mutilation violates right. We will end the menace, declares First Lady. Says 34 million Nigerian women, girls at risk by 2030. Federal government discloses 19.9 million already affected. Upskills obligation to end scourge. NHRC advocates strengthening of collaborations. We've lifted over 2 million individuals out of poverty in Africa, Lumelu is saying. You can find details on page 5. We have a picture story with the caption Kayide's Fayemi's 60th birthday symposium, where we can see Vice President Shatima alongside Kayide, the celebrant himself. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
Moving on to the next paper, Nigerian News Direct, we have TUC manufacturers kick against the proposed 65% hike in electricity tariff. The writer here saying 2013 power sector privatization yet to yield results, coming from Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. And regarding appointment saga, Tinubu sacked Uni Abuja VC, who happens to be the youngest VC, and then shuffles the board for UNN, Uni Oyo, and others. More detail found on page 23. NNPC Limited, first ENPJV, achieved 96% reduction in routine gas flaring. And then as well, we have Minister proposes review of basic education model, 16 years age limit for tertiary admission, with detail found on page 23. Bauchi earmarks 7.8 billion naira for reconstruction of assembly complex. And then we have a picture story as well on the front page. Do well to get the paper in more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On First News newspaper, the first story, veteran actor Columbus Irisonga passes away. Lawmakers dead, Anambra now, war zone under Soludo, LP cries out. The big story, Shetima makes bold claim, Americans now prefer Nigeria for kidney transplant. NDDC internship scheme sparks fury in Niger Delta over alleged favoritism. PDP summons Anyanwu Otom, 10 other over anti-party allegations. Kemi Badenoch proposes stricter immigration rules, extends British citizenship timeline. Federal government re-awards contracts for second Niger Bridge bypass. We have a story here, Tinubu fires UNN, Uni Abuja VCs in major shakeup. And a picture where we can see Vice President Kashim Shettima host Nigerian nephrologist at the State House, highlighting the surge in reverse medical tourism as starting U.S. patients undergo kidney transplants in Nigeria. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
Moving on to the next paper, the Daily Times. Autumn Anyanwu to face PDP disciplinary committee next week. Fingers crossed regarding that story. Still on Daily Times newspaper, groups seek release of 25 million naira counterpart funds to save pregnant women in Bauchi State. Poverty ravages rural communities in Cross River. Edo governorship poll, we have no weakness, INEC tells tribunal as it closes defense. Downside of the paper, German government dehumanizing Nigerian migrants, with data found inside the paper, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, the big story, mass shakeup in leadership of federal universities. The writer says Tinubu removes Uni Abuja, UNN VCs, appoint replacements. It's part of broader effort to reform higher education system. A statement from the presidency. Teachers union commences strike in 7 Ebonyi local government areas. At the top of the paper, LCII seeks suspension of 4% FOB levy, bemoans lack of consultation. EFL Cup, Liverpool to face Newcastle in final after thrashing Spurs 4-0. Telecom tariff hike, TUC talks tough, blames hike on mismanagement of FX, says citizens feeding from hand to mouth. More governors come in as House of Rep proposes creation of 31 new states. NPA reviews tariff after 32 years to ensure port competitiveness. You can find details on page 11. Abducted Anambra lawmaker found dead near second Niger bridge. Leadership requires more than good intentions, Fayemi tells Tinubu. And then we have an entertainment story. You can find details on page 21. And then a picture story towards boosting trade. Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu arriving at a dinner event at the Intra-Africa Trade Fair with the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, yesterday. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, 65% of inmates are awaiting trial, says the Nigerian Bar Association president. Detail will be found in the paper. Regarding PDP crisis, Inkibi led disciplinary committees summon Autumn Anyanwu and others. The big story, TUC reject tolling of highways electricity tariff hike. Says federal government implementing policies without engagement, and that is why there is a need for wide consultation before we see the government passing certain policies. May mobilize for mass protests over federal government policies. So we're seeing even TUC are really not finding all of these policies funny. Do well to read more detail of this in the paper. Alleged 423 billion naira scam. Northern Christians give EFCC 72 hours to arrest El-Rufai. More detail will be found on page 29. Tinubu OK 65 years retirement age for clinical skilled health workers. Former NYSC DG General Sage kidnapped in Katsina. We hope that he will be, rescued and brought back to his family. Reps won life imprisonment for fake drug producers and importers. Still on Daily Independent newspaper, Deputy Speaker Reps Committee called for Nnamdi Kanu's release. And then we also have downside of the paper, tension in Rivers community as cultists kill 5 persons. More detail can be found on page 6, and that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune newspaper, Tinubu sacks Uni Abuja VC barely 5 weeks in office. Acting UNN VC also removed university's leadership overhaul. Federal government proposes 12-year basic education model. 13 patients from U.S. came to Nigeria for kidney transplant. Statement from Shetima. PDP disciplinary committee summons Anyawu autumn orders over petitions. On Edo Guba, INEC closes case without calling witness. Opebelo opens defense Monday. Lakurawa terror group Senate orders fact-finding visits to Zamfara, Sokoto, and Kebbi. You can find details on page 5. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, Man TUC won over proposed hike in electricity tariff. The writer says planned increase may lead to closure of more businesses. Ill-timed, deliberate act of economic oppression against Nigerians. This is what the TUC is saying concerning the government's actions. NPA reviews port tariff by 15%. In Oshun, Adeleke engages 10,000 youths for Imole Youth Corps. Kogi Assembly bans foreigners direct access to cashew nut farmers. You can find details on page 4. As African leaders, we must abandon foreign dependency, a statement from President Tinubu. The writer under the story, poor leadership, bane of African development, Mbeki is saying. Details can be found on page 2. On Constitution Review, you can find details on page 3, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Guardian newspaper, federal government swaps 6334 education system with 12-4 model, scrap GSS and SS. So you can do well to find more detail of what this means. Hours after matriculation, Abuja Varsity VC Governing Council sacked. Additional at 65, Tinubu, Sanwo-Olu, Abiodun, Atetola, Brown, the African Development Bank President, Nigerians' best export. You can find more detail of that on page 3. Still on the paper, we have fresh inflation concern as NPA raised port charges by 15%. Grim realities in the southeast as government dictate funeral terms. You can find the detail of this big story on page 4 and 5. Tinubu Gowon Mohammed chat part to Africa's growth and prosperity. Manufacturers want federal government against new electricity tariff hike. And then also still on the paper, hold IOC divestment till environmental remediation is done, reps tell the federal government. Nigeria record world highest road accident, says Red Cross. So this is really a sad one. We hope we look forward to reducing the number of road accidents. You can find more detail of this story on page 7, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, ex-NYFC DG Brigadier General Siga, 11 others abducted in Katsina. Tolling will enhance Nigeria's road infrastructure, BPE boss is saying. Tai Taiwo inducted into Marcel's Hall of Fame. NNPC Limited first E&P JV achieves 96% reduction in gas flaring. You can start with the details on the front page. Move beyond slogans for independence, Tinubu tells African leaders. We have other stories on Blueprint newspaper. Do well to grab it, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Alright, before we continue further with the paper review, please let's take a time out, let you chew the stories, and when we come back, we will continue with the paper analysis. Please stay tuned with us. Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories that made it to the paper, where we're seeing concerns that have been raised by the transmission company regarding the increase of electricity tariff, what it will mean for businesses as well as even individuals. And at the end of the program, we're able to also clarify some of the stories that we're making around on the papers regarding the proposal that have been submitted by the rep. We would see that the reps have come out with a press release to say that this information is yet to be, unconfirmed. So please do not mind the information. There are certain procedures that need to be followed according to the Constitution before such thing can be passed. So we hope that you also take cognizance of all of this. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, we will continue looking at other stories on the paper. Let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. Port charges to go up by 15% as MPA pushes for efficiency. Detail will be found on page 19. Minister pushes for transition from 934 to 12-4 system of education. You can read more detail of that on page 7. The big story: uproar as IGP PSC clash over retirement of police officers. The writer following that story here say IGP has no power to stop PSC. This is coming from the retired DIG. And then it's about self-preservation coming from retired AIG. I don't see this as IGP rejecting our decision coming from the PSC PRO. Affected serving officers sue the police commission. So you can do well to read more detail of the story on page 8. UK citizenship, where we have Kemi Badonad didn't single out Nigeria coming from the foreign minister. Decomposing body of kidnapped Anambra lawmaker found on second Niger bridge. Very sad one. You can find that story on page 7. Fallout of Trump's executive order in Nigeria. Programs stop it, job losses trail US aid fund freeze. The writer say US aid affiliated NGOs shutting down, which we actually said that as a result of this, a number of NGOs in Nigeria are suffering. Program disruption from US aid fund freeze, and then it will have negative impact on Nigeria coming from AZC. And then also we have George blocks Trump's executive order voiding birthright citizenship, another policy that was passed by the president of the US. Still on Vanguard newspaper, Kanu's release will bring peace coming from Reps panel. Sharia will ignite war in the southwest, Chief Imam of Yoruba land is saying. Man caution against further hike in electricity tariff, you can find in the paper. And as well, we have a story for sport on page 29 regarding the 2025 Under-17 AFCON. can do well to read more detail of that, and that's all on Vanguard newspaper.
On leadership newspaper, Tinubu ends Uni Abuja VC crisis, sacks Mekudi. Bandit kidnap ex-NYSC DG, others in Katsina. Residents wailed as fire raises houses, cows in Kano. We are surprised GHL is appealing favorable court ruling, First Bank Council is saying. The big story, fuel distribution, pipeline rehabilitation faces fresh challenges. Expert says no viable product, conveyor belt, funding causes setback, rehab to address tanker explosion incidents. You can find details on page 4. We have a Leadership Gold Standard Awards picture series where Bashir Adeniyi, Controller General of Customs, receiving the Public Service Person of the Year 2024, is saying, "I am grateful for this gesture from leadership. This is a testament that the society is watching what is going on." And that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at Business Day newspaper, where on the paper there, the big story here, 1 year T-bills attract 3 trillion naira on high yields. You can read more detail of that story in the paper. How secret music codes boost album sales. And also Dangote Refinery ramps up PMS production to 33 million liters per day. You can read more detail of that story in the paper. And that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, we have an Elizabeth Onyanacho exclusive. Being the first Nigerian female taekwondo athlete to compete at 2 Olympics shows that with dedication and proper support, we can achieve great things. My deep love for taekwondo. You can find her interview on page 6. Tony weighs in on Juventus Osimhen plot. Chukwueze State Trails Milan director. Alonso ponders Boniface 6 partnership. Usman advises Adesanya after Saudi loss. You can find details on page 2. Marcelo retires from football. The young on Liverpool Raider, Arsenal plus 120 million euros Lautaro summer move. City's FFP charges compared to Juve cheating. You can find details on page 4. Joshua ready for return coming from Hen. And we have Ochonoga wins SWAC pre-NSF long jump. And that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
Right, let's take a look at another paper, which is the Voice of Liberty newspaper. Coming from Kaduna State, Deputy Governor intervenes on lingering power outage, which we saw that Kaduna there have been a blackout there, and he's intervening. And then regarding the kidnap that took place in Katsina, bandits kidnapped former NYSC DG and 7 others. Marketers ditch NNPCL as price war with Dangote Refinery intensify. Still on the front page of the Voice of Liberty, Tinubu reshuffles leadership at Uni Abuja, UNN, and other federal universities. Sheikh Hussain Islam El-Rufai over lack of accountability and transparency. Coming from the ex-president Buhari, my tenure significantly improved security and the economy. Renew Kaduna Restoration Group praises Governor Sani. Fiscal management condemns ex-official policies. And that is all on the Voice of Liberty.
On this metric sport, what a journey. Real Madrid legend Marcelo announces retirement. In Syria, Osimhen not suitable for Juventus, a statement from Tony on FA Cup. Van Nistelrooy declares in the defeat for Manchester United clash. EFL Cup, Liverpool to face Newcastle after trashing Spurs 4-0. And that's all the news on the Matrix Sport.
All right, let's round it up with New Telegraph newspaper, where we have maritime. Federal government raised tariff by 15% to feed port infrastructure. You can read what that means if you need to clear your goods at the port. And then LCCI seeks suspension of 4% custom processing charge. Still on the New Telegraph newspaper, Tinubu sacked UNN Uni Abuja VCs, announces leadership changes at several federal universities. Regarding anti-party activities, Anyahu Autumn 10 others to face PDP disciplinary committee. Federal government re-award 2 bypasses for second Niger bridge. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, we have Drama at colleague dumb corpse of police inspector and flee. This happened in Ondo State. Senate probes alleged Nigeria-France coalition to destabilize Niger Republic. Upsurge in awaiting trial inmates, conflicting court pronouncement worrisome. This is coming from the NBA. As well, we see federal government scrap junior secondary school education system, replaces the 6334 system with 12-4 model. This reform will align Nigerian system with international standard and foster global competitiveness. More details will be found on page 4. TUC reject proposed 65% hike in electricity tariff, oppose the federal government move to toll federal roads. More detail can be found on page 3. We have a study as well. You can do well to read that story on page 29. And as well, we have a picture story on the front page of the paper. And that's how far we can go, New Telegraph. And this is all we can say for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Rachel, for
You're
always
welcome,
doing this
Celia.
with me. Until we come your way again next week, please do have a lovely weekend ahead.